Okay, so I've given this video quite a negative title, things I got wrong in my first release, but this is not going to be an overall negative video. I am going to talk about some of the mistakes that I have made in the recording and production process of my very first self-produced song, but I'm also going to look at some of the things I got right. Hi guys, it's Emma, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, then welcome to the chaos. I do all things music related on here, from audio engineering style content to production and songwriting challenges to just talking about music and musician life to talking about my own music releases as a form of shameless self-promotion, but also interesting content. But those of you who've been following for a bit will know that I have started a new artist project that I put together both to actually put the branding around my own music better, but also match up with the fact that I am now fully self-producing everything, whereas before I was just sort of going into studios and getting stuff recorded and not really knowing what my goals really were in terms of what I wanted my career to look like, but just recording and putting out music for the sake of it. Whereas now I have more of a goal for what I'm doing with my artist stuff and more of a goal for what I'm doing with my music career in general. And that's why I set up a whole new project, it felt like I needed that fresh start from that. Anywho, the first release for that project came out a little while ago now. I'm not sure exactly when I'll put this video up, so I can't give you... It's been out for so many weeks. It's been out in the world, and I thought I'd wait a little bit for it to have been out for a little bit before I tell you how this song is actually the worst thing I've ever produced. It's not. I'm very proud of this first release. And just a quick few things. I picked it as the first release for the project, both because it was the first song I actually finished of the 7 that I worked on, and also it just felt like the message and the overall meaning behind the song was the right first song to put out. The song is called Rise, for those of you who don't know. It's linked in the description if you want to give it a listen, and you may well want to go and give it this is not just shamelessly plugging at this point. Go and listen to it first, because give me streams first, but you might want to go and give it a quick listen before we go on with the video, because I'm not going to play it in full at any point in this video, and I'm going to basically be talking about production decisions and the recording process on the song, and it's going to be easier to put them in context if you have just listened to the song through. As this was my first release, there's a lot of learning curve basically went into it. All 7 of the songs I've done, when we went through the mastering process, there were issues that got brought up with each of them in the mastering process. In a couple of them, it was issues with the fact that I've used sampled drums, and sampled drums are very freaking loud because they're samples that have already been treated and stuff. So actually balancing things like that out in the mix, I think I prioritized turning other things up to meet the drum level when I should have been turning the drums down a bit more. Some issues with gain staging initially when I recorded the vocals on everything. I found it really hard gain staging my own vocals. If for no other reason than, when you're literally trying to monitor yourself, you are monitoring yourself in terms of your performance, and you're monitoring yourself in terms of what the actual output into your DAW is. It's actually quite difficult to do. The easiest way to do it is basically to record a take, go and check it, make some changes, record another take, go and check it. And I did do a few different versions of the different vocals on all of the different tracks, including this track. I re-recorded the vocal on this track 3 times, and part of that was because I wasn't getting the performance right the first couple of times. And the final recording I've gone with, I think the recording quality was worse than one of the previous ones I'd done, but the performance was better. It may well have been worth taking that extra time to re-record the vocal one more time, but I just really liked the performance of this vocal so well. But yeah, these are all things that I have learnt, and that going forward, I probably won't make some of these mistakes again. But point being, all of the tracks have some issues, but Rise in particular, there are a few things that I just want to point to that I got wrong, and that I now have learnt and won't get wrong in future. And I'm already not getting wrong in terms of recordings I'm doing with a friend at the moment. Also some things that I got right and that I've learned from that as well. So let's just have a little listen to some of those bits that I got wrong. So I want to first of all play the chorus to show you guys this vocal was a serious issue for me. So So just for some context, this is the mix before mastering, and when this mix went into mastering, the mastering really highlighted that this vocal in the chorus, there's distortion and stuff, and it's been over processed, and just overall, I recorded it in too hot. And why have I got it set? I've only brought it down by 1.7 dB. I didn't sit and... Because another thing is, when you're working on a track like, and producing it and mixing it at the same time instead of produce it, then send it off and let someone mix it, you aren't doing maybe the mix process right, because you're mixing as you go. And some of the problems I think with mixing as you go is that you set the levels of certain things based off how they're sounding with the stuff that's currently on the track, and then you start adding other stuff to the track and you don't go in and then change those gain levels like maybe you should have done, because now that there's other stuff on the track, you realize that actually the overall volume of the track needs to come down. You need more headroom, so you need to bring everything down and then just balance it all back out again, but at a much lower volume. Why the hell is this set at -1 dB? And then obviously, instead of actually just getting the gain staging right on a lot of this and balancing out this track nicely, I have then gone in and gone to town on it with plugins. I know this is too many plugins, especially as where is it? Where's Mix Rack? That's not one plugin. That's 4 things on it in there. And like, I do think that doing things like adding the dynamic EQ was a good step, and, you know, is something that I learned as I was going that I was going to need to do with my vocal a lot. Was dynamic EQ on my lead vocal is often a better choice than just outright EQing it, because a lot of the weird frequencies that poke through are only poking through in certain places, so they're just not, it's not needed to be EQ'd out. Anyway, that's a good thing I made, a good mix decision I made on this. But I just went overboard because it was too loud. There were things that were just going to be not quite right about it that then I just kept throwing plugins at to try and fix. And I know you're not supposed to do that, but there's knowing that, and then there's actually applying that knowledge to the decisions you make when you're desperately trying to make that first track sound really, really good. You know, overall, it's come out not sounding that bad. You're there on the edge between success and regret. You know, and there are moments in this lead vocal production, like in the quieter bits. So much potential. Don't waste it waiting to see. Wasted so much already. Too many years, too scared to. It has better moments, but overall, the production of the lead vocal is letting this track down. And it's one of the things that I think I can genuinely look at the track and say, I'm sad that I messed that up a bit. It could have been better. I haven't made that mistake with a couple of the others in the 7. I did improve it as I was going. You can hear that from this first track that I finished from the 7 I worked on to the last track that I worked on. Especially those reverbs, man. No, the first bit's the worst bit. It's here that's the worst bit. You have so much potential. Don't waste it waiting to see. And miss something essential to make you who you're meant to be. I actually had to go in and do a fix after we did the mastering process, because the mastering process, generally, it's gonna like turn up the volume overall of the track, and it's gonna balance things out in a way that means that little gremlins in the mix can poke through. Gremlins being things like little vocal blips caused by a reverb that you're like, what the hell is that weird sound? And there was this weird sound that was coming in here. And I could not for the life of me figure out what this sound was until I went, you know what, I'm going to mute that reverb and see if it still happens. And it didn't happen with the reverb mute, and I realized it's Valhalla. And I hadn't done the side tone compression technique. And actually, I haven't put an EQ on this either, which is probably also part of why this reverb sounds so naff, is that I didn't do any EQing into the reverb beforehand. That was a bad choice. But I didn't originally have this compression on, and that was, you know, something that I started doing long after I was working on the reverbs on this track. I started implementing that trick more often, you know, sidechain compressing your lead vocal reverb back to your lead vocal. Sometimes it doesn't need it, other times it does. On this track, it needed it. But the bigger thing I think it needed was I shouldn't have put Valhalla on this vocal. And I think it was because when I first started working on this track, it was over a year ago that I started working on this track. and I was picking up plugins that people were telling me to try. Valhalla Supermassive in particular, people, the free reverb from them. They also talk a lot about their vintage verb, and I do want to actually get their vintage verb and try it at some point, but it's not free, so everyone waxes lyrical about Valhalla Supermassive, and so I was trying it on pretty much everything, and I've been using it on loads of my reverb and reverse thingies, and for those it worked really well because it gives you these big epic reverb and delay tails that sound really good for then reverse that and make a swell out of it. Yeah, cool. But it really did not suit my vocal on this track. It was too much. What I should have done is put on a nice plate, and then I should have used delay. And I wasn't playing around with delay as much when I first started working on Rise. I was a little bit afraid of delay, not really understanding it, especially not really understanding it as anything other than a tool to use for doing delay throws and stuff. Whenever people were just putting delay on a vocal just as a reverby atmosphere adding kind of sound instead of as an actual effect that is causing a vocal throw to happen. I was like, I feel like that's reverb's job, really, isn't it? Well, and delay, I can't see delay doing a good job of that, but I've honed my delay skills more recently, and I understand better how you can implement certain different types of delay to get just a nice atmospheric sound to a vocal, and that would have worked better on this. And that is what I've done recently with a friend's vocal on one of the tracks we're working on together. Gone in with a delay, and I've automated that delay so it's coming through more at the ends of lines and stuff. And should we do a positive next, or should I just continue with the negatives and then do some positives? Because another negative is just staring me in the face. I had a violinist do various violin parts on the 7 tracks. This is the only one I think I didn't have her do anything on, but this one I was only going to put pizzicato on. I was listening to it, I actually wish I had put a proper violin part on this track, but I decided to put violin parts on everything after I had worked, because this track was not just finished before any of the others, it was finished, almost completely finished, just doing some mixing and production tweaks to it before I even began work on a couple of the others. It was very separated from the rest of the project, and I wound up having to sort of go back and tie it in with the other songs a bit more, because this track, you guys won't remember if you've been watching the channel for a bit, this track came from a songwriting challenge I did, where I took the Inktober prompts and I produced a short verse chorus song for each of those prompts. Pretty much all of the production on this track, the drums and the drum sounds that I've used, the choices in the guitar, the plucked at the start and the strummed in the chorus, the bass and stuff, this piano, you can see this piano was originally at the start of the track, and when I went in and did the production choices on the full track later, I decided not to use the piano in the first bit, to just have that come in the verse. I'll come back to that in a second, because that's one of the decisions I really like about this track. But all of those decisions of things that were going to go onto this track were made for that first challenge I did. I'd already made a lot of choice around the production on this track that then meant when I came to finish it off and tie it in with the others, it already had a bit of a soundscape that wasn't necessarily matching up perfectly with some of the other tracks. And to try and tie them all in together a bit more, I decided that this also needed a little bit of violin in it somewhere. And in hindsight, had I not already had some production decisions made on this track based on how that verse chorus was sounding, or had I, maybe muted some stuff and tried some new stuff with it and changed up what I was doing with it a bit earlier on, and decided I'm going to put violin on this and written a violin part for it and worked more stuff around the fact that there was going to be a violin part in this, the violin part in question would have been better. It would have sat nicer in the track. I would have had the violinist actually record it. I probably would have had some bowed parts in there as well as pizzicato. Probably still would have gone with some pizzicato, but instead I've got this pizzicato that I played. Overall, it's just sort of performing essentially the same job as the plucked acoustic guitar. It's not really adding that much to the track. I like the pizzicato violins, and I think they fit in the track well, and I would have had them there. But I maybe would have made decisions about tying that in more and having other parts in with violin and just stuff that actually made that fit better with the track overall, rather than it being the afterthought that it was. But let's come back to that decision that I made that I really liked, and that was this piano, which originally, like I said, it was here at the start. It was one of the first things I put on this track when I did that challenge, and obviously you can hear that now it's not playing from the start. We've basically just got my acoustic guitar and my vocals is all that's playing at the start, with some oohs in the background, and then in comes bass and drums in the chorus. And then when the second verse comes in, that's when we get this piano. And I'm very happy with that, and I like that it just comes in here and it's in there really subtly, just adding a different texture in that second verse. I think overall the arrangement choices in how I have the track build, I think that was something I did really well in this track, and that I will carry through those decisions and that thought process of make sure you aren't putting everything in right from the start. Like give some space, and make sure you're dropping things out as well. You know, just because it was playing at the start doesn't mean it needs to play at the end as well. But yeah, I am overall happy with the arrangement decisions on this track. We'll come back to them in a second, because the one big thing I'm not very happy with in terms of the arrangement on this track and in terms of like the sound choices and stuff is the drums. You're there on the edge between. Good choice of kick, good selection of two kicks that mix nicely together. We got this one and we got this one, so that's adding some oomph and that's adding some beef, and it gives this really nice overall kick sound. The snare I'm also very happy with. It's 3 snares put together. I quite often put 3 snares together. I am greedy when it comes to snares. So this is snare 1. This is snare 2. And this is snare 3. And they each just add enough to get an overall snare sound I'm very happy with. The thing I'm less happy with is all of these. Now, these are the original little click sounds. I used one of the UJAM drummers when I was just making this track. I was working very quickly on all the tracks of that Inktober challenge. It was just get something produced and put up was the whole point of it. And because of that, I wasn't necessarily putting as much thought into the overall choices of things like drum sounds. I was picking the first thing that sounded quite right for the genre type of sound that I was going for. And so I picked out a particular UJAM plugin for this one, picked out a particular set of sounds on that, and then just went in and programmed something in with those sounds. And I was happy with the choice of that overall beat that it's creating. I like, but the sounds themselves that are used in it, I don't think now fit where I was trying to go with the track once I was trying to bring it in line with everything else. I think they could have done with being more organic sounding, you know, more of a natural kind of cymbal type sound, more of a natural kind of shaker type sound, more of a natural kind of woodblock type sound. And they're not mechanical in a nice like gear clicking kind of way. Like I feel like this could have done with more sounding like gears moving. That was laziness. That was, well, not even just laziness. Those had been on from the start. When I lengthened out the track and started on the production, I just copied and pasted stuff over initially. And I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd stopped and I'd gone, right, before we copy and paste over all these drums, what do we think of these? Because I did that with the kick. I switched out the kick and I switched out the snare. But I didn't do it with the other drum sounds, and it's the biggest thing I regret, because then when it came to the point where I was starting to consider doing that, I'd been working on all the tracks so long and I wanted to start putting them out, and it was like, that's another job that can take hours. Like finding the right sounds and putting them into your track can take hours sometimes. But the other thing was, I'd gotten so used to it at that point that I literally could not imagine what other sounds to put in there. It's that demo thing that people talk about. People talk about how if you're going to go into a studio and work on a track with somebody, you shouldn't do too detailed a demo and end up falling in love with it too much, because then when you're working on stuff that may well even actually be better for the track overall, you're not going to be able to hear if it's better for the track or not, because all you're going to hear is that it doesn't sound like that initial demo because you've been listening to that demo for too long. And that happens even without, you know, not even a demo, just an actual track where you've been working on it for too long. And you might be thinking that something still isn't hitting right with it, but you physically cannot hear what that is anymore, because what that is might be something that's been on that track from the start that you now can't imagine it without it. I can imagine this track without it now. I think I would need to strip all of that stuff off and maybe strip off some of the other parts and really go back in and try adding new drums, adding in a violin part, and then seeing where things wanted to go from that. That's just a mistake of taking something from one project from a while back, fleshing it out for a different thing, because initially I fleshed this track out to send off for feedback on a music for sync course that I was taking. So I did it with that in mind. And then I decided that actually I really wanted to make this track my first single. And so, you know, that's fed into how this track has wound up produced and some of the bad decisions made in it. But that also fed into some of the good decisions made in it, I think. So, like, we already covered the piano coming in here, but it also has that little swell. I stole that from another project I was working on for that Inktober thing. I did a piano chord reverse swell thing in one of those, and it worked really well. And I went, you know what, that's what Rise wants here. I had this bit after the chorus had finished, and I knew I wanted a pause here and then something to lead it in. And there are a few like slight pause moments throughout the track like that, you know, stuff where either certain instruments are just dropping out, so that just like the violins can sit there, or into the chorus as well. That gap so that we can have the toms. The toms, I think those were perfect choices. The toms, they sit really nicely in this track. Changing up the vocal at the end so that instead of, initially it didn't do that for ages. This was a very last minute addition. Literally the last version of the vocal I did, I just changed it up. I went, you know what would it sound like if I did this instead? Before, that was exactly the same as it was in the other choruses, but I had been gigging this song by this point, and when I was gigging it live, I was like, this last chorus is not hitting, and so I tried something out, and this worked really well, and so I decided to put that in the track, because I hadn't actually finished the track yet, so I had time to be able to make that change. Another really good production choice, I think, is what I did with the acoustic guitars. So obviously, at the start, we've got the plucked guitar, and we've got just mic'd versions of the guitars. I think the acoustic guitar tone on this is great as well. That's the one thing I think I have mixed to perfection on this track, is the acoustic guitar. You have so much potential. You're there on the edge between success. And then these strummed guitars come in, and they've got both the mic'd up versions and the DI'd version, which sounds like this. This is the DI'd version. I like doing this as a trick I've talked about in other videos that I like doing, but I love using a DI'd acoustic guitar and then putting it through like an amp simulator. I've used Neural Amp in this case with a Fender Bassman, and I really love having that in because it just adds some grit to the acoustic guitar without outright making it sound like an electric guitar is coming in. And that works really well overall on the track. And then we have the same thing with the plucked guitar, is I bring in the DI'd version, which is layered in a lovely reverby guitar. We're using Guitar Rig, using the Fire Seeker, and then that is layered in some lovely reverb. And I've also got this mixed in gently. I didn't realise I'd done that. Which is just giving it a little bit of extra lift. But yeah, we've got that comes in there. You can't really hear it in the chorus. You more feel that its presence is there. But the bigger thing is then I have it drop out again for the post-chorus. And then I have only that DI'd version. I drop out the two mics for the next verse. So much and I think that was a really good decision, because basically it takes, the verse part is exactly the same, but simply swapping out the tone of the guitar that's playing it worked really well to just differentiate. And then from the second chorus onwards, I don't know why these don't line up, because I would have lined them up before, but oh well, I obviously didn't do a good job of it. I have another electric guitar. And actually, if you listen really carefully, it's really subtle, but there's a little yum in it that leads in. And that just beefs out the second chorus a bit more to make it not the same as the first chorus, and that then becomes chugging. So this is what that's what the acoustic guitar is doing. Bass versus the electric. And that carries on into this last chorus, so we keep chugging instead of doing the single strummed chords like we had before. And I think that works really well. I also had this last bit of a synth coming in from that bridge on. I like doing that. It's a nice way to add it adds a lift that you more feel than hear for the most part, but it's a way of just lifting those last choruses. I think that overall, it's mix decisions and initial recording decisions that let this track down. Because I started it so long ago and then took so long to finish it and finish the overall project it was on, I kind of just sat with the version I had and saw it as the finished one that I didn't have to worry about as much. And because of that, I think that I was a bit too previous with deciding it was finished. But overall, I think I wanted it to sound epic and really dramatic, and I think it definitely sounds like that. It's definitely a very dramatic track. I've achieved that very well. It's come out a lot better than I was bracing myself for my first self-produced track to sound. So I'm very happy with it. I just know where I would go differently with future projects. I just wanted to take some time to talk about that because I've been thinking about it a lot recently. You know, with the track coming out, I started thinking about whether I was happy with it, what I wasn't happy about with it, and what I was happy about with it, you know, reflecting on it. But I think I'm quite happy that I'm reflecting on this track in a way where I don't feel like I'm like, it's the worst thing I've ever created, I never want to listen to it ever again, I hate it. I feel optimistic from this track. I know where things went wrong with it, and I know decisions I would make differently in future projects because of it. Anyway, that's Rise. That's a little bit of insight into how I feel the production of it's gone. I'd love to hear any things that you guys think about the production of the track, things you really liked about it, choices I made that you thought were really good choices, or, you know, stuff that you maybe would have done differently as well. Because just because you would have done it differently doesn't mean that you think it's crap, just you wouldn't have done that on the track. I look forward to being able to play you guys some of the other tracks of the 7, and then, you know, the next project from this. I'm really excited to get started on that. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then you might enjoy my content on this channel in general, in which case you might want to hit that subscribe button, but I know that that is a big decision to make. You wouldn't want to subscribe and unsubscribe, so do feel free to check out some other videos first so you can be certain about your choice. There's something recommended on the end screen. If you want to follow me on all my socials, they're linked below. There are also links down there, obviously, to my artist socials, where you can stream my music and all of that stuff related to my Emma Echo project if you want to check that out. And lastly, there is a link down there to my Buy Me a Coffee account, where I have memberships for both my artist stuff and this general channel here. You get exclusive content if you join those, but you can also just send one-off donations if you wanted to say cool video mate. Okay, that is all for today's video. I will see you guys next time with another fun music or audio related video of some sort.